In this lesson, I'm going to give you a broad overview of the CSS Designer panel, which is where you create and manage most of the style rules that control the look of your web pages. Even if you've used a previous version of Dreamweaver, you can't afford to skip this lesson. The CSS Designer consolidates functionality that was previously spread over 3 panels and dialog boxes: the new CSS rule, CSS rule definition, and CSS styles. Those panels have gone or are scheduled for early removal. The CSS Designer is this panel here at the bottom right of my screen. If you can't see it, go to the Window menu and select CSS Designer. There's a keyboard shortcut on Windows, Shift F11. There's no equivalent keyboard shortcut on a Mac. In the default compact workspace, the CSS Designer is shown as a single column, and the panes are rather badly bunched up. So what I'm going to do is to switch to the expanded workspace by opening the workspace switcher and selecting expanded. Then I'll close the insert panel by double-clicking its tab. Incidentally, if you're on a Mac and can't see the workspace switcher, go to the Window menu, select Workspace Layout and Expanded. In the expanded workspace, the 4th pane occupies a column of its own, making it much easier to see and to work with. So let's look at the 4 panes. The first one here, Sources, lists all of the internal and external sources of your styles. And if you click the plus button here, it opens a menu which allows you to create a new CSS file or style sheet, attach an existing CSS file, or define in the page. Define in page creates a style block in the head of the current web page. The Add Media pane allows you to select global styles and media queries. I'll deal with this in more detail in the chapter on responsive web design with fluid grid layouts. The Selectors pane lists all the selectors or the style rules in your CSS, and you can create new selectors by clicking this plus button here. And Dreamweaver's code hints list all of the IDs and classes in your current web page. You also get code hints for HTML elements, for pseudo classes and pseudo elements, so that speeds up the process of building a selector. And the Properties pane is where you set the values of the CSS properties in your current selector. The properties are organized in logical groups, and in the version of Dreamweaver CC that I'm using, there are 5 icons at the top of the Properties pane. The second one for text, then border, background, and others. The CSS Designer lists all the main properties, including CSS3, that are supported by all modern browsers, but new ones are being added all the time in regular updates to Dreamweaver CC, so I'll leave you to explore for yourself what the Others category contains. You might also find that there are extra icons that are added at the top of the Properties pane in a later version of Dreamweaver. One of the main features of the Properties pane is the use of visual tools like this one here for margin and this one for padding. They make common tasks more intuitive and designer-friendly. Let's show you how that works. I'm going to turn on Live View by clicking the Live button here. And then I'm going to click inside this heading here to select it. At the top of the Selectors pane, it says Computed, and what it's showing you is the cascade as applied to the element that you've selected, with the most important element at the top. This one at the top is the style rule that applies directly to the element, but it also inherits from these other style rules down here. And in the Properties pane, if I click the Show Set checkbox, it shows me the styles that apply to this particular element. So let's see how the padding visual tool works. So I'm going to hold down the mouse button and drag to the right to scrub, and you can see that it's adding padding to the bottom of that heading. A very visual way of working with your layout. Now that's obviously too much padding, so what I can do is just mouse over here. That brings up these 2 icons. If I click the trash can icon, it removes that particular property and it jumps back into place. If I choose another selector in the Selectors pane, if I choose this one H1, H2, H3, you'll see that it's added a highlight to that level 1 heading, and if I scroll down you can also see that this level 2 heading and the level 3 heading down here are also highlighted. This can be very useful when trying to identify which elements are affected by a particular style rule. If you want to turn off the highlighting, just click the selector again, and clicking it again toggles it back on and off. Personally, I find that this highlighting gets in the way of designing a web page, so what I'm going to do is to turn off the highlighting by going to the Live View Options menu at the top here and selecting Disable Live Highlight. There's also a keyboard shortcut. It's the same on both Mac and Windows. It's Control F9, and that turns off the highlighting. But if you need to turn it back on again, just go to the Live View Options and then toggle it back on. It won't immediately show on anything that is selected, but if you select again, you will then get the highlighting. But as I say, I'm going to turn it off. I will leave it up to you to decide how you want to work. The CSS Designer is a very powerful panel with a lot of features, but it's designed to be visually intuitive, and you'll learn a lot more about its capabilities as you progress through the course.